It seems like it's been a minute since our last festival showcase, but it is time for another mega size indie dev showcase here on the channel. For this video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite demos from Gamescom and Dreamhack Beyond 2023. Mechinus is a kind of clockwork, steampunk style action adventure. I'm not quite sure we're going for Metroidvania levels, at least from my time spent in the demo, but I love the aesthetic. We play as what appears to be a gear that especially also has a mustache, if you can see it. And we are exploring this world where it seems like an evil eye keeps giving us a menacing glare as we explore. The general aesthetic appears like we are literally on rails, or on kind of gears and cogs and so on, trying to explore and figure out what is going on. With that said, the demo itself doesn't quite show off anything unique from a gameplay point of view. Most puzzles can be solved by interacting something going one way, or interacting with it going the other way. And I'm wondering just how much there will be to the gameplay that can fit this fantastic aesthetic. But I do hope we see more of this game, and I'm curious to see where it will all lead. We now switch over to Stellar Watch. This is a tower defense style roguelike. In this one, we replace towers with our spaceship and kind of drone support. Your mission is to set up the drones at various points around the ship, and then you will rotate them to try and match the waves and line patterns of the different enemies coming to get you. You can try and block them with your towers, but it will end up with them being damaged and of course destroyed. Every time you clear a level, you'll be able to choose an upgrade, and it kind of follows the node-based design of, say, a Slay the Spire. You'll decide whether to either upgrade an existing tower or unlock a new one, and of course towers will come with different ranges, attacks, themes, and all that good stuff. I like what I was seeing here, but each kind of match is multiple waves, and it did feel a little bit slow when we talk about like a roguelike kind of node-based structure. And I'm wondering how this will play out in a full run in terms of how long it's going to take, and whether or not there'll be any like different enemies or situations beyond just, again, rotating your ship around and blasting things. But I did like what I was seeing with this one, and this is another one where I'm curious to see where it will go in the finished release. We now turn to Prison City. At the time of when we played the demo of this one, the game is actually due out in a few days, and maybe out by the time you're watching this video. This is a modern retro platformer that is clearly inspired by the classic Power Blade, where instead of using a cyber-enhanced boomerang, we are using a cyber-enhanced chakram. It is the dystopian future. Detroit has been turned into the titular Prison City, but it has been taken over by techno-terrorists, and that's a lot of T's to say in one sentence, and it is up to us as the one lone soldier to infiltrate the city, stop the terrorists, and save the day. The game wears its inspirations on its chakram, sleeveless arms. You'll explore each one of the areas, looking for a key to access the boss door, get in, fight the unique boss, clear the area, and you move on to the next. Your weapon damage is dictated by your gauge in the upper left, so you can't button mash and still expect to do full damage. As you explore each area, you'll find power-ups, extra lives, healing hot dogs, and other things. The 2D art here, or pixel art, is really well done. Love the chiptune soundtrack. If I had any complaint about the design of this game, it's how the hang works. You see, in order to hang, you need to be holding up when you're nearing an edge in order for him to grab it. But if you have any kind of dead zone issues on your analog stick, or you're not holding perfectly up, they won't grab it, and this can lead to a lot of missed ledges and of course losing lives. And I hope that they're change that, or they make the option just to auto grab edges, because that would make things a lot easier. If you're hoping again for a game that is going to be doing something completely new with this design, I don't know if Prison City is going to do that, But if you're in the mood for another modern retro action platformer goodness, then I would definitely suggest checking this one out. We now have the Fall of Aether Station. This is a tower defense roguelite. We are defending our station from waves and waves of enemy ships, and we must keep our fleet alive and leveled up in order to do so. The hook of this game is every time you clear a new wave in a map, you unlock kind of an experience or progression point that you can use to boost your different ships, unlock things, and so on and so forth. Each ship, which you can kind of see in the bottom left hand corner, belongs to a different type which affects its stats, as well as what kind of turrets you can equip onto it. And you are free to mix and match turrets in their respective slots, provided they can fit. As you play, you'll try to level up your entire fleet, which will let you get further in each map, get more progression points, and we repeat as often as necessary. The game also boasts an interesting twist that while you are playing in space, the pathing that the enemies will take on each wave will change procedurally based on where you set up your different fleet. So if you're kind of hogging one specific spot, they may change the path accordingly. Now on the maps that I played, we really didn't get to see kind of the full extent of that, and whether or not there'll be major gameplay implications for that on later maps. Unfortunately, the game did crash, and we kind of broke the game on stream. Unfortunately, the developer was there to watch in horror, as I did. But there is certainly something here in terms of its roguelite tower defense, and I'm curious to see kind of like, what does the advanced play of this game look like? We switch from roguelite to roguelike with Odinfall. This is a kind of post-apocalyptic cyber Norse mythology mix-up, and that is certainly a sentence there. We are going to have to try and save what remains of this world by picking up lots of weapons, shooting our way across procedurally generated spaces, and trying not to die in the process. This game is certainly inspired by Nuclear Throne from its UI to the general structure of it. Where the game will differ is that besides finding new weapons and getting resources and ammo, you can also find mods that you can attach to your guns that can change their properties in unique ways, such as making your gun shoot out additional bullets, making it do less damage but also take away or reduce the amount of ammo it uses, and so on and so forth. Like Nuclear Throne, however, it still has that kind of issue where it does feel like it's so easy to run out of ammo, and that there's probably going to be a very definitive tier list of what is the best and worst weapons based on their ammo to damage comparison. But I was enjoying this one. Again, this is certainly for someone who's looking for a new Nuclear Throne in their lives, and this could be a very solid take on that design. We have plenty of Metroidvanias that will be featured in our showcase this video, and Aestik is one of the first. So this one, as you can pretty much see very clearly by its aesthetic and UI, is inspired by Hollow Knight. We are exploring yet another kind of broken world, things are trying to murder us, and we are going to pogo bounce and Metroidvania our way around. The general movement and combat felt good to play, but the main issue that I had with Aestik is in the open world structure. The game doesn't really present its kind of map and the world design as cleanly and as easy to follow as some of the other Metroidvanias we've played. There are plenty of cases where the foreground actually blocks some of the entrances to new areas, and the game also suffers from that popular issue of there's a door, you go in, get the power-up, and then finally you have to go in the complete opposite direction to use that power-up, to then go back in the complete other opposite direction in order to go do something else. So there's going to have to be some improvements in terms of the pacing and structure, but if they can nail that, this could be another kind of game to wait nightly for a hollowed experience. And we're back with a roguelike tower defense, this time with Towerful Defense. Here, we are defending our tower from waves and waves of, looks like, circles. At the end of each wave, you'll gain experience, which you can then level up, as well as money to buy new artifacts and raise your stats. As you unlock more elements, they'll show up in future runs and waves. And the game structure reminds me a little bit of Brotado, in that kind of wave/build style format. And this is one of those games that it does start a little bit on the devil's side. If you pick the wrong starting power, or the starting powers don't feel all that balanced, at least at the moment, it can become very frustrating to survive. But once you kind of get off the ground, you'll be able to get more powers, start boosting your damage, get additional abilities, and so on. I'm kind of wondering how far this game is going to go in terms of depth, as by the end of our play, I was just kind of on autopilot, swinging my little sword around and watching things melt. But if you are looking for another in the roguelike tower defense feel, this one could be something worth checking out. We now turn to Core Devourer. This is a bullet heaven-like, as we are trying to deal with lots and lots of enemies with a little bit more of a structured kind of approach. As per the norm of the genre, you'll be fighting enemies, collecting various doodads that drop, which will act as experience. Every time you level up, you'll be able to choose from one of 3 randomly chosen perks, with rarer perks providing more benefits, more potency, that kind of thing. When time runs out, the game will spawn kind of a mini-boss that you will have to deal with, and then once you beat them, you'll be able to continue things forward. There are different resources that you'll collect off of the various minerals, enemies, and bosses you fight, and those act as the persistent unlocks, which will let you unlock things such as starting with more health, more damage, a free perk, that kind of thing. With that said, the general basic feel of the game I felt was okay, but not quite sure if it will be doing anything too new or out there from the bullet heaven genre. But this one still felt like a very solid take if you haven't already gotten completely tired of these games yet. We now turn to Destroy the Monoliths. This is a kind of interesting mix of tower defense and roguelike or persistent campaign structure. How this works is that each run takes place on a different planet. Each planet is made up of various areas that you will have to kind of set up and mine and build resources around. When you load into an area, monoliths will spawn. Your target is to destroy the monolith in each area before you lose your kind of starting hub or that crystal. When you mine resources, you'll be able to use them to either construct new structures or put down walls and other defenses. When you start attacking the monolith, that's when the game is on, and it will just continue to spawn units, with more coming as it takes more damage. The monolith itself will also spawn experience orbs, which will allow you to level up, which can be used to either improve passives, unlock new buildings, and so on, and those stay persistent while you're on said planet. And the game itself is doing a whole lot in this respect. You need to balance resource management with kind of building walls and defenses around the monolith without of course leaving your core and so on exposed. It does admittedly feel a little bit chaotic at the moment, and one of those games that while you can play with gamepad, it feels like this is definitely more suited towards a keyboard and mouse, especially with all the finagling you're going to have to do. There's definitely some potential here, but I do think it could be maybe structured a little bit better in terms of onboarding and just kind of getting someone set up before they unleash the shape-based hounds at their base. We now turn to Astrobit. This is a top-down multiplayer spaceship shooter. You'll choose your kind of starting ship as well as the weapon and perks, and then it's up to you and maybe some friends to fight against other people to see who will come out on top. The general gameplay of this one felt really nice. Each weapon has different abilities, you can also unlock different passives. As an interesting touch, one thing that I really love that this game does is that every player is given like a safe time that they can use to unlock new perks or level up their character where they cannot be hurt. That's the kind of shield you see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And it means that you can have some decision making without the chaotic nature of the game getting in the way. With that said, however, this is a game that it feels like it's going to be focused on multiplayer. The footage that you're seeing is from when I play with the AI bots, but if you don't have friends or enough people to play this as a multiplayer experience, there may not be enough here otherwise. But if you do have an audience or some friends willing to hang around and play this one, Astrobit looks like it could be a lot of fun for some spaceship shooting. And now for another kind of spaciness, we have I Need Space. You play and explore out in the very wide and wonderful universe, when one day you stumble upon the most adorable cosmic cat, who may also have the ability to warp the fabric of space and time around them. And we are going to explore our lovely and cozy little galaxy, getting into some adventures, finding music, and just having a grand old time. The structure of this one is kind of like a, I would say, very light survival adventure game. You do have oxygen and you will lose it as you're kind of exploring the vacuum of space, but anytime you run out, you'll just be sent back to your spaceship with a little slap on the wrist. Your mission is to explore the galaxy looking for kind of cosmic stars to feed to your cat, which will then in turn unlock more areas, which will unlock more challenges, more puzzles, and more shenanigans that you will get into. The entire game just gives off this very kind of wholesome and cozy vibe to it. This is a great game to kind of zone out and chill to. Each kind of planetary body is also loosely named or referenced after a popular indie game or indie studio, or just games in general. And there's certainly a lot of fun to be had going around. This is by no means going to be the hardest game you're going to find out there, but this feels like a very delightful game to play. You can also have this kind of sub-game where you can create your own constellations in the sky, and of course take pictures, share with your friends, and so on. So if you like the cosmos, if you like cats, and if you're looking for a very cozy game to enjoy, then I think I Need Space is going to be a really delightful game for you to check out. We now turn to Somnipathy. I'm pretty sure I butchered that title, and there'll be of course a link to that down below. This is a very intriguing game. It is a mix of point-and-click adventure, dungeon crawling, day-night visual novel style game. There's a lot happening here. We play as Aggie, a girl who is just having a very horrible time at work. Job sucks, she doesn't have a lot of money, she's just trying to make it through each day. Also, there's a dream demon who has invaded her home and haunts her nightmares that she must have to contend with. Just, typical Zoomer stuff, I suppose. So the game itself feels like, a very unusual mix of designs. While the store page describes this as a point-and-click adventure, you're doing a lot of moving and trying to avoid enemies and so on. Each night, you go into this dreamscape, and the dreamscape is handmade. This is not procedurally generated. You'll explore looking for items, clues, and things to solve in order to move your way through. Run out of stamina, or make it to the end area, and you'll go back to the waking world. During the daytime, you'll be able to do your job, buy items and useful things that will help you in the dream world, and I'm sure there's going to be more, maybe even a Persona-style relationship system, although I'm not quite sure that's in it. As you explore the nightmare, you'll learn more about what is going on, fight some bosses in some unusual ways, and try to stay one step ahead of the demon, who will chase after you to some extent. You can avoid them for a certain period, but then there will be certain rooms that they'll just pop back in like Nemesis style to get you. You're not really doing like combat or direct interaction with enemies in this one. In order to kind of defeat an enemy, you have to kind of do this little pseudo minigame each time you run into them. But this is definitely not going to be a game where you're going to acquire the shotgun and then start killing everything around you. The aesthetics, I think, are very well done. They give off like kind of like a zombies ate my neighbors kind of vibe to them. And I'm really curious to see where both the story and the gameplay are going to go. So, if you don't mind staying awake at night and looking for a very different take on all these genres, then this could certainly be one worth adding to your wish list. We now turn to something that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse with Complex Sky. This is a logistics style game that takes us to the skies. The planet has been overrun with pollution, and we are going to build a self-sustaining floating city of buildings and optimization and automation and all the other Asians that you can think of. Now, the game itself is a little bit more on the advanced side. Don't be like me and skip the tutorial videos, as that can end badly for you. Our hook here, in terms of logistics, is that you'll need to construct kind of a two-layer system of a ground surface to set up for roads, essential utilities, and of course placing your various buildings around. You'll set up mining tools and mining machinery on various resource nodes, and you'll need to connect the supply to your resource gatherers, to where the resources need to go, using your warehouse and some just basic supply lines. Buildings can be upgraded with additional modules that can change their functionality or add additional utility, and some buildings will get adjacency bonuses for different things, such as your rice farm gaining more production if it's next to some healthy trees. And this is all the while you'll need to balance the health, happiness, and resources of your various workers to make sure they'll be able to work in your various buildings, pollution isn't overwhelming anyone, and, like per usual of the genre, trying to automate all those annoying things that you never want to do by hand ever again. So this is a game that it is clearly meant for the fans of automation style titles. The UI and general kind of GUI of this game is a little bit hard to follow at the moment. This is a game that you can click on something and be given an entire half screen's worth of information, stats, and figures as you're just trying to figure out, why are my people not getting enough water for their various services? But there is certainly something here, and by the end of our play of it on stream, I was getting into this game, and of course, I had to at least automate one basic resource before we ended our play of it. So if you are someone like me and you love a good logistics style game with a lot of supply lines and automation, then I would highly recommend checking out Complex Sky. We now turn to Gift. This is a kind of puzzle platformer where we play a stranger who wakes up aboard a ship that has apparently hit something and is now sinking. It is upside down, and we are going to figure out how to get out by puzzle platforming our way across the ship, while rescuing some survivors, or they may not be. The game is kind of a little iffy on that front. The kind of key element that Gift has is that the world around you will shift and rotate by virtue of the ship sinking and moving as it's going down. So it reminds me a lot of that classic Super Castlevania level where everything is rotating around. You need to kind of keep altering your trajectory and your movement. However, in this game, that is done at fixed elements. So the levels get kind of a very economical use out of this, as you may have to go through the same area several times, with the rotation kind of affecting where you can't go now. I really didn't get a chance to see if there's any differing mechanics or tech that gets unlocked. The demo was quite short in that regard, but this could be an interesting, somewhat deep sea platforming adventure. We now turn to Constance. This is another Metroidvania that, again, has a very Hollow Knightly kind of feel to it. We live in a world with magic paint, and an academy has been taken over and slowly being corrupted, and it's up to us using paint and brush in order to platform and Metroidvania our way to freedom and maybe save the day while we're at it. So, like our previous Metroidvania we covered in this video, this game should be very familiar to anyone who's played a Metroidvania in the last few years. I love the aesthetics and visual design of the game. Now, as a very interesting twist on this formula is that your paint operates as both your magic and movement tech. That is the purple bar under your health in the upper left. Using your kind of special attack that grants you longer range and being able to hit vertically or at up and down around the character will drain your paint supply. When it runs out, you'll still be able to use those maneuvers and elements. However, it will cost you health instead of paint. And this is kind of the resource management and I guess quote-unquote stamina bar Constance has going for it. As another very nice touch, the game features a trinket system, passive things you can equip to change your character, in the form of inspirations. These will be attached to kind of like a painted grid, and instead of it being limited not only by space, there's also kind of like a Tetris element to it as you have to organize them so that they're not overlapping each other. Combat felt really solid, and this was one of those demos that I had to stop playing simply because if I didn't, we wouldn't have time to cover everything else. So this is definitely another game I highly recommend for the Metroidvania fans in the audience. We now have Footgun Underground. This is an action roguelike in the post-apocalyptic future, where in order to survive a dungeon of subway tunnels, you must use the power of football or soccer if you're in the United States to save the day. The general gameplay here is that your ball will move in relation to where your character is when you hit the kick button. I would have liked like a slow down or a way to have more fine control, especially when there's only like one enemy left and you're just trying to hit them. The maps are made up of nodes and points of interest, which clearing them will allow you to get access to new balls, resources, and upgrades you can attach to both your character and to your ball. As you'll explore, you'll have to deal with enemies, trying to get your ball to angle right into them while avoiding damage yourself. The game definitely has a unique flavor to its action roguelike design, although having to again kind of manipulate the physics-driven ball can be a little bit annoying, and it is very easy just to not be able to hit that one enemy who may be a little too high or too low, depending upon where you're trying to aim. But if you are a fan of soccer and looking for some roguelike fun with it, then you should definitely check this one out. Now we turn to Need for Cheese. This is an action RPG in a strange world where you are a humanoid rat who's in search of the most important substance, and that is cheese. Because remember, he who controls the cheese controls the universe. You're going to be exploring a mix of handmade areas in the form of the overworld, and then going to the dungeons for procedurally generated challenges, finding loot, and more. The game is definitely on the action-based side, as you'll be able to move, shoot, and gain other abilities that you'll need in order to level up, get new gear, get new powers, and so on. The game features a kind of hub-based progression, where finding resources, recipes, and more can be used to unlock new features, gear, and options back at your hub base. As an interesting point, I don't believe this game is going to be set up for multiplayer. It is going to be in early access, so I don't know if they're going to add that in with the future. From what we played with this one, it is fairly solid action design, although the UI can be a little bit all over the place, especially in terms of trying to understand what gear does, and trying to figure out where you're supposed to be going, and that kind of thing. But if you're looking for a very action-focused action RPG, then this could be a cheesy thrill for you. Now we have Light of Atlantis. This is a Metroidvania game where we play as a tiny robot that's exploring the remains of Atlantis, trying to figure out what happened to the massive city, and solve lots of puzzles and swimming along the way. Our key kind of puzzle element in this game is that many rooms will allow you to submerge or remove the water from it. This will affect the properties of objects and enemies in the space. Some enemies are far more passive when there is no water and become more active when there is. There are secrets abound, and there is going to be some decent combat, at least from what we saw in it. The demo was on the shorter side, so we didn't really get to see different movement tech, different bosses, that kind of thing. But the game definitely has a charming aesthetic. I'm curious to see where it will go in terms of the difficulty and kind of how these mechanics will evolve. Now we turn to Turbo Shell, and this is definitely not as serene as our last game. This is an incredibly challenging precision-based platformer. We play as Craig the Egg, who must platform their way across all manner of environments in order to save the day. Our key element in this is that you have the ability to shoot two different kinds of blasts. The blue shot will kind of repel you away from a surface, the red shot will attract you to it. And you'll need to make use of both very quickly, I should say, in order to collect all the targets and make it through alive. On the normal difficulty, you'll have multiple checkpoints you can set down wherever you want in a level. On the higher difficulty, you only get one per stage. And in order to survive, you'll need to quickly get used to how all these craziness is going to work. Now, the game itself reminds me a lot of when we played Thrusty Ship, in that this is a very challenging game. This is meant for expert level players, and if the thought of replaying a level many times in order to get through it doesn't interest you, then I don't think this is going to be the right game for you. But if you love kind of like physics-based jumping and looking for a game that will really test your jumping and excellent timing, then definitely check this one out. We're back to FPS and some roguelite action with Soulslinger Envoy of Death. This is a game where you play as, I guess, a worker for death in a Western-themed kind of limbo world. An evil group is trying to harvest souls for themselves and cut death out of the picture. So it's up to us as, well, the Envoy here, to go out there and shoot our way and solve things along the way. So this is again built around kind of the same archetype of, say, a Gunfire Reborn, or even something that's going back to like a Dead Cells, in which you'll explore different rooms, different areas. Killing all the enemies will get you access to whoever is the reward of that area. This can be in the form of new persistent currency, blueprints to unlock new weapons, perks for that specific run, so on and so forth. And you'll keep moving forward until you are either killed or you make it to the end of the run. The gunplay itself, at least at the moment, is okay. Part of the issue the game has as a roguelite is that there's a lot of like spongy enemies at the start. The kind of tier 2 enemy that we play in the demo basically just infinitely spawns minor enemies. And with you only having a 6-shooter, makes it a little bit harder to deal with lots and lots of enemies at a time. During the course of the run, you'll be able to find kind of different elemental perks, and this will allow you to add a new power that can come in the form of a kind of spell you can use, bullet modifier, or modify your dash into something else, such as like you'll leave like a fireball when you do a dash. With that said, the game definitely has some potential. I'm curious about how much variance it will actually be in the full game, however, as it did feel like once you get into that groove, it then just becomes a matter of unlocking the persistent elements and new weapons, and nothing else is really going to matter. But if you are a fan of kind of the roguish design when it comes to FPS play, then you should keep an eye out for this one. We now have Bobls, which hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. This is a 2D platformer that is built on a similar design of that of Bubble Bobble, but we're moving the single screen format to turn it into a series of challenging platforming levels. Your job is to use your bubbles in order to maneuver around levels, collect all the jewels, get to the exit, and do it as fast as you can. The game comes with not only a single player campaign, but a 2-player co-op that is unique, and a level editor. From what I played of this one, the general platforming felt very solid. You can use the bubbles in the level to propel yourself up, and you can also shoot bubbles that you can use to bounce off walls, collect items from far away, or set up from some interesting tech where you'll shoot the bubble out and then try to bounce off it on its way back. The levels of the game definitely lean more towards, I would say, the challenging side. I'm curious how far they're going to go in the finished game, but with a level editor, there could certainly be a lot of potential here. And I really enjoyed this one. There is certainly potential here for fans looking for a 2D platformer that plays a little bit differently. And I'm sure if it does grow in popularity, there can be some very fiendishly designed levels to make use of all this tech. We now have Savant Ascent Remix. This is the kind of updated, bigger, badder sequel to the game Savant Ascent, with the music done by the artist of the same name. This is a 2D kind of action, I guess like score chaser style game, where you are climbing a massive tower with robots all trying to get at you. The tech here is that you can charge your shot for a second to do more damage, and you have a super shot that works along the same principles. That is the meter at the bottom of the screen. You can dodge attacks by either jumping between platforms or jumping straight up in the air. While my voice is probably drawing this out, the music in this game is phenomenal. With that said, I do have one bit of a UX issue. The game introduces a lot of enemy types. Each enemy has its own behavior, whether it will charge in a straight line, move in a curve, shoot a bullet, that kind of thing. I would have liked a better on-screen indicator to let you know what is the proper way of dodging. Because enemies will do kind of like curves or weird patterns that, unless you already know ahead of time how to avoid it, you're gonna take a hit. And when you're playing this on hardcore difficulty, you have no extra lives. There is a normal mode that does allow you to get a life every time you clear a section, but it can be frustrating when you're seeing enemies come at you and you don't really know at the time how to avoid it until it is too late. With that said, the game certainly shows potential. I like the aesthetic. Again, music is fantastic. I'm wondering, again, like our last game, how far they'll go with more options, depth, and additional gameplay compared to the original release. But if you are an action shooter fan and looking for one to really get some great music to, then definitely check this one out. Now for something a little bit differently, we have Selini, S-E-L-I-N-I. This is a atmospheric Metroidvania style game. Some people compare it to the likes of Limbo or Inside in terms of the atmosphere. All we know is that we are on a destroyed world where apparently some kind of robot, something bad has happened, and in order to maybe figure things out, we are going to have to platform and Metroidvania our way across the destroyed land. The main thing this game has for it is the atmosphere. There is no written dialogue, there's no dialogue whatsoever, and you're going to have to understand and figure out what the rules are and what you should even be doing in it. And that is, of course, kind of a downside to a game like this, as it is very easy to get lost or not even know where you should even be focusing your attention on. There seems to be multiple upgrades, and the game is going almost completely non-linear. As long as doors are open to you, you can go in that direction wherever it may lead. This is looking like it could be a little bit on the frustrating side in terms of onboarding and just getting into it, but if you can get past those hurdles, there could be something interesting if you're looking for a very atmospheric and challenging Metroidvania. We now turn to Spellcats. This is an auto-battler meets deck-building roguelike. You're in a world populated by magical cats, and they're trying to figure out what is causing them to disappear, and you must use the power of cards and cats in order to save the day. The gameplay here is that after each battle, you'll be able to choose different cards to add to your deck. Cards are categorized by rarity, costs, and they're kind of elemental types, so like red is fire, yellow is lightning, blue is water, and that kind of thing. You'll build a lineup of cards with the ultimate goal is to have them set up to be synergized, such as a card that, let's say, boosts the effect on all death effects, or this card makes water cards do more damage or have more health, and so on and so forth. And the game definitely has some interesting aspects in terms of card or party composition along those lines. However, and it's a kind of an unfortunate point for the demo had a lot of bugs to it. The tutorial message got stuck. We kind of soft locked at least 3 times trying the demo, and it definitely led to some frustrations in terms of onboarding and just trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. The general gameplay here is solid, but I'm hoping that the performance issues and soft lock issues will be ironed out before the game is released. We now turn to Terror at Oakheart. This is a 2D kind of horror adventure game. When Teddy the Clown goes on a murdering rampage in the 80s, we learn that something is not quite there, and there may be supernatural forces going on with his murder spree. The game itself has a very interesting twist in that you'll play not only as Teddy, going out to murder his unsuspecting victims, but you'll also play as several of the people in the town trying to survive against Teddy. And it definitely delivers a different kind of feel as you're both the hunter and the hunted. The game's main loop here is definitely more on the adventure side, as you'll look for items, solve puzzles, and try not to get murdered or be the murderer, depending upon the map that you're on. My main concern with this game is that I'm not sure if there is any kind of, decision making on the player's part. If every mission is just kind of locked into what you can and can't do. But I do like the aesthetics and the mystery of this one. And if you're looking for a game where you'll be both the killer and the killee, then you may want to check this one out. And now we turn to Kind Nature. I'm not quite sure this game is set up to be kind of a single-player deck-building RPG or a deck-building roguelike, and you'll understand what I mean in a second. In this game, it is the post-apocalypse in Europe. We are leading one of the few remaining groups of survivors, and we must go out into the world, collect resources, fight lots and lots of people, and try to rebuild our camp at the same time. The game itself is structured around your kind of camp as your persistent upgrade area, and then going out into the world on missions where you'll get into deck building fights with enemies. The resources that you upgrade or the buildings that you construct back at your base will impact what cards you have access to when you're out in the field. Your dog, using kind of a specific resource, can then run back to your camp to get you a new card to add to your deck for that run. And the challenge in this is that when you do the missions, this will move like kind of the day-night cycle along. As days go on, new buildings can be constructed or upgraded, which can either enhance cards, add new cards, and you get the picture. The combat itself is quasi-turn-based. There is an active timeline at the top of the screen. Cards, as well as certain abilities, can affect the speed of either you or the enemy. How this works is that when one of the icons gets to the middle of the bar, that's when you decide what cards to use, and then when you get to act at the end, that's when those cards will be activated. So it is possible for someone to go first or use speed ups to allow them to pick and use their cards before you can, or vice versa. It's a very interesting idea, but I'm still not sure how the overall progression of this game is going to be. Is this going to be like a, 8 to 10 or even more hour-long campaign? Is it just focused on roguelike runs? And I would like a little bit faster in terms of like animations and just like making the UI a little bit snappier in some respect. If you're not tired of deck building style games and looking for one that looks like there could be some meat on the bones to it, then you may want to check this one out. We now turn to Parry Nightmare. This is either a bullet heaven hell or a bullet hell heaven? One of those two, I'm not quite sure which just yet. But our concept is that we are struggling with nightmares, and we're going to team up with our dream self to fight lots and lots of enemies, bullets, and more bullets. The gameplay here is that your spirit can parry bullets and enemies near it. The length or the size of the parry is based on your motivation. When you knock enemies down, your demon friend over there can then go over and take them out. When they get taken out, they leave experience, which kind of fills up the gauge on the left. When it completely fills up, you win the map. You also get like a super attack to hit and kill everything around you. Now, one of the things I had a little bit of trouble with was figuring out why I kept losing motivation when I was trying to parry bullets and enemies at the same time. Also, I would have liked my kind of parry bubble indicator to grow based on what my motivation is. But this is certainly looking like it's going to be a very different and very challenging take on the bullet heaven hell, however we want to call it, formula. Now for something a little bit slower with Afterdream. This is the latest game from the developer of the Distraint series, which is kind of like a sideways adventure horror style game. In this one, we are trapped in a lucid dream. Something strange is going on, we can't wake up, and we're able to solve a myriad of puzzles in order to get out before something may very well get us. The game itself leans more towards the adventure side with elements of horror. There are some cases where you will be chased or you'll have to hide away from something trying to get you in the dark. The puzzles themselves will rely on you finding clues and items in the environment in order to solve them. The unique element or unique mechanic here is that you'll get a camera that will allow you to take pictures in specific areas to either reveal something, add something to the environment, something along those lines. My concern about is that it can be a little bit slow to move around, and you're eventually going to have to do this in every room in order to make sure that you're not missing any secret clues or secret puzzles and stuff like that. I like the aesthetic of this game, and like the previous games, I'm curious to see where we'll all lead when we get the finished version. So if you're looking for a little horror with your adventure, and if you haven't played the Distraint games yet, I would also recommend checking them out as well. We now turn to the Edge of Allegoria. This is a very adults-only take on the JRPG formula. You are in the land of Allegoria, where everyone hates you. And in order to try and become a hero and maybe earn a living, you're going to go out into the world, fight monsters, collect lots of loot, get lots of equipment, and try not to die in the process. The game itself is built very much on the JRPG formula, as you'll get into random battles. The twist here is that every piece of gear you get has an associated skill to it. That as long as you're wearing or using it, you'll eventually master that skill, which will infer unique buffs or additional stats and so on to your character. For when we play the demo, the major gameplay loop is classic JRPG turn-based combat, but again, filtered through a lot of cursing, profanity, and mature situations. So this is one of those games that it is probably not going to be for the kids watching this video, but I like the charm of the game, and I'm kind of curious and a little bit scared to see how far it's going to go in the finished title. For our last game of this massive showcase, we have Drova Forsaken Sin. This is a kind of open world action RPG with a very heavy emphasis on Celtic mythology. Something is going on in the land, monsters and beasts are running rampant, and we're going to just be one person who's going to have to try and figure out everything that is going on. The combat itself is built on kind of like a flow, as you'll need to manage when you're swinging to dodging attacks, and it looks like there's going to be a fair amount of depth in terms of equipment, different ways to upgrade and build your character, and of course who you decide to work with for the story. With that said, the demo itself kind of left it a little bit hard to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. I kind of got lost several times in it. But this does look like there could be some promise here for those of you looking for a very lengthy open world experience, and you're looking for a game with some faster paced combat to boot. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.